Over the last few weeks, I've dived into the original Nintendo Switch library, all in a quest to see what games get boosted or upgraded in a way when they're played on the Switch 2. So far I've covered over 80 games in all, pretty much the ones that target 60 FPS. But for today, let's switch gears a bit and check out some games that are noteworthy, or rather notorious, on the Switch for their performance issues. And let's see how they compare when they are played on the new system. Some of these games got some pretty big turnarounds, some of them a little more minor, but you'll see it all as we dive into the list here. Unless you traveled to a pretty decorated island, or had a heavily decorated island of your own, then you might be completely unaware of Animal Crossing New Horizons' performance issues that could appear on the original Switch. If you were big into decorating, or visited a very decorated island, then for sure you would encounter various issues, like the frame rate taking a nosedive, never hitting 30 FPS except when you're inside a building, longer load times are around, and of course, severe pop-in issues that would plague the experience. On the Switch 2, the very same game doesn't encounter those issues anymore. Maintaining 30 FPS on very decorated islands, load times have been cut down across the board, and of course, those severe pop-in issues are all gone. It's a very smooth experience now. Of course, I'd love to see this game get updated to 60 FPS, and heck, I'd love to see more content added, but for now, at least Animal Crossing New Horizons' performance issues are pretty much fixed on the new system. Longtime viewers of the channel might remember when I reviewed Art of Rally, a top-down rally racing game. At the time of the review, the game was a bit of an indie hit on PC, so I was pretty stoked to give this a try out on the original Switch. Unfortunately, the console port was a performance mess. Lots of pop-in issues, poor draw distance, and a low frame rate with lots of stutters. And to be fair, this wasn't just a Switch issue alone. The other console versions got screwed over too. The console porting team just did a really poor job optimizing the game, and they never really fixed it. So, you're probably wondering, how is the Switch version on the new system? Well, technically it is better on the Switch too. The draw distance is a bit better, and the frame rate is a bit better too. But sadly, it's still a pretty poor way to enjoy this indie game. While things are better, they still don't hit the expectation of where they should be. The frame rate can still stutter at times. It's not solid, it's not perfect. There's still some pop-in issues, even though it has been reduced a bit. And without a proper patch, it still just isn't the way it should have been. While most of the past Atelier games have been fairly good to play on the original Switch system, the Switch version of Atelier Yumia is pretty poor. It could never hit the 30 FPS cap, the game lags a lot, and its overall clarity, especially in handheld play, is abysmal. When the same game is played on the Switch 2, it hits 30 FPS pretty much all the time now from what I could tell. Most of the lag issues have been addressed, and it looks sharper now, especially in handheld play. The game is much better now. I'd still say it might be worth waiting for a dedicated Switch 2 version. I'm pretty sure we'll get one down the line, but at least the Switch version, if you do have it, is playable here now, and it doesn't look like a mess like it used to be. Looking at the entire Switch library, Batman Arkham Knight might take the cake as the most disappointing release on the original Switch. It's really freaking bad. And honestly, I expected that to be the case when it first got announced with the Switch some years back. It was always going to be an uphill battle trying to get the game to work on the original Switch system, and simply put, it was going to need a miracle to somehow be good. And to the credit though, it does quote-unquote run on the system, but holy cow, is it a frame rate and performance mess. Low FPS all over the place, and the visual clarity and resolution is pretty poor, and yeah, it's just awful. Anyway, I had to test out the game on the Switch 2, and the system does boost the game. You get some better visual quality, both in docked and handheld play, and a much higher and more consistent frame rate, and all that. It's actually kinda amazing considering where this game used to be. That said, there's something you gotta be aware of. With the current Switch firmware, the game gets a new problem. It is very much crash happy now. Yeah, the game will crash a lot. And it happens so much so that Nintendo has removed its Switch 2 compatibility rating for the time being until it gets addressed. And it's unavailable for purchase on the Switch 2 eShop. So yeah, it does look better now, but you can't really play the game. This poor game just cannot get a break.
I ain't staying to find out!
I love the Muso or Warriors types games, I really do. And I do appreciate what Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity was trying to do, with its spin-off, story-based take that allows us to explore events prior to Breath of the Wild while playing as a host of different characters. There's lots of fun characters here to use, with lots of different styles all their own, good mechanics, and added elements from Breath of the Wild and all that. It's just too bad that the performance of the game is so awful. And that being mainly the frame rate. It utterly tanks when the action gets heavy, dropping frames down to the low teens, sometimes even lower than that. And considering it's a Muso game, that situation is going to happen a lot during your playtime. On the Switch 2, from what I played, it's so much better. The game is hitting 30 FPS more consistently throughout, with some quicker load times to boot. No, it's not 60 FPS here, and visually, it could use a resolution bump, or a bump to the textures, or both, but still, it's far better than what it was. Here's hoping there's some kind of update from Nintendo down the line to make this even better. Jump Force is a rather notoriously known anime fighting game from publisher Bandai Namco. The game was heavily criticized for its gameplay, as well as its visual style of the anime characters. It was just not a well-received game, and it ended up being a huge disappointment for Bandai Namco. The game actually got delisted a couple of years ago too, which for most anime fighters these days, they tend to stick around for quite a long time. So that fact alone tells you how bad Bandai Namco really wanted to sweep this mistake under the rug. Anyway though, beyond its gameplay choices, the Switch version itself had some pretty serious knocks going against it. It was noticeably really blurry, as well as frame rate issues galore. Yeah, it was a mess. For those curious, when the Switch version is played on the Switch 2, the game does have some improvements though. The load times are much better, frame rates are more consistent throughout, and while the game's textures need some serious TLC, the game is sharper and docked in handheld play. That said, those boosts alone are not going to save this game though, it just has too many design issues, but it's still interesting to see the improvements.
で答えよ。
こっちだ。やった。僕たちの勝ちだ。
I've covered Echoes of Wisdom before when talking about games that get improvements when played on the Switch 2, but it is worth mentioning again how much better this game is now on the new system. Its frame rate used to be all over the place, dropping from 60 FPS, when it could ever reach it, to well below 30, and then shooting back up and down consistently, especially when you're traveling throughout the many environments in the game. Now to be fair, some patches after launch did smooth out things a bit on the original system, but the free Switch 2 upgrade pretty much completes the turnaround, as the game is 60 FPS at a consistent rate now. Plus it looks great with the increased resolution in docked and handheld play. The game is smooth as butter to play now, and I highly encourage you to check this game out on the Switch 2. Much like a certain Witcher game that we'll be talking about later in the video, the port of No Man's Sky to the original Switch is admittedly one hell of a miracle port. To get there though, Hello Games had to make some compromises though. There's no multiplayer for one, but beyond that, the game's geometry details have been turned down quite a bit. There's less detailed textures, and the game has a much lower frame rate here. It is playable, it really is, and it's a lot more palatable when you're playing in portable play, at least after the initial updates, but still, it is a compromised version of the game. The Switch 2 upgrade, which is free to all owners of the Switch 1 version of the game, be it digital or physical, completely revamps things. It's a night and day difference from where it was before. This upgrade produces a much better image quality, greatly increased geometry, and higher texture details, better draw distances, and overall, much better performance. One of the things I like about this version of the game is the ability to unlock the frame rate, and with that, we can get a much higher FPS than 30, at times looking like it reaches 60 FPS. Now you'll experience some frame rate drops that you normally will not see when the game is locked to 30 FPS, but still, I personally would much rather have the higher frame rate overall. It looks pretty good, and the drops don't affect me too much. I think the higher frame rate makes the game pop. I've covered No More Heroes 3 in my boosted to 60 FPS on Switch 2 series, but it is worth mentioning again how much of a big of a boost the game gets when it's now played on the new console. On the original Switch system, the game was a bit of a mess. Traveling around the overworld, you'd hit no higher than 30 FPS, and in battles, it should go higher than that. But the real problem was the game actually maintaining any of that. Would drop frames in either instance pretty consistently. Now it pretty much maintains the caps non-stop. It's 30 FPS in the overworld and 60 FPS pretty much locked in battle. Yes, we would have preferred 60 FPS all around, but at the very least, it's not dropping frames like crazy like it was before. It's much more playable now.
Strawberry, right? Raspberry, double Screw crusher, death blueberry, triple kill. Hey, what's wrong? Cranberry, super kill. Poison berry, first blood.
When talking about the worst games or the worst offenders on Switch 2 performance-wise, the Pokemon Scarlet and Violet games are always going to come into the conversation. It's an utter disappointment how these games performed on the original Switch. Low resolution, frame rate issues, and severe pop-in issues galore. These games are a performance mess on there. With the free updates for the games, it gets a massive turnaround. The resolution has been increased in handheld and dock play, and everything appears so much sharper now. Pop-in has been greatly reduced, and load times have been cut down across the board, and overall performance is just so much better now than where it was before. The update fixes a lot, and these games are much more enjoyable to play now. You'll never want to go back to playing these games on the original Switch ever again after playing them on a Switch 2. Rune Factory 5 is a bit of a controversial entry in some ways, and the original Switch version gets a few more knocks against it, all due to its performance issues, low frame rates that struggled to maintain any sort of consistency at all. Plus, the game has some pretty long load times on top of it all. It's just a pretty rough experience on the original system. Here on the Switch 2, it gets boosted to the 30 FPS cap and maintains it, and load times have been greatly cut down. I still would love to see a patch unlocking the ability to get to 60 FPS though.
Nice. There you go. There you go. There you go. There you go.
SNK Heroines Tag Team Frenzy on Switch 1 was a bit of a hard game to get into for many reasons, but one of the biggest problems it had was its performance issues. When it came to the performance of the game, it was just not good at all, which is a huge sin when it comes to any fighting game. Its load times too were pretty abysmal. When the same game is played on the Switch 2, all that gets pretty much corrected. Its performance is much better, with the game reaching 60 FPS, and load times have been cut down quite a bit too.
Finish! Player 1 wins!
この女どうやって鳥を出したんだまるで手品
While most of the Story of Seasons games on the original Switch are absolutely fine to play, Pioneers of Olive Town got the short end of the stick in terms of the performance department. It had a hard time maintaining a consistent frame rate, especially as your farm grew in its size. It just got so very poor as you progressed. Here on the Switch 2 though, the Switch 1 version maintains a consistent frame rate just fine, and it's actually much higher than where it was before. It's a much smoother gameplay experience now. All things considered, it's pretty amazing that Witcher 3 got ported to the original Switch. To make it happen though, Saber Interactive, the developers behind the port, had to make a lot of sacrifices, especially in terms of the game's visuals. This version takes some definite hits to its looks and its performance, particularly in terms of its frame rate, which was not the most solid. It's not the prettiest looking version of Witcher 3 for sure, but hey, all the content is there, on the go, with cross-save support with the other versions of the game. One of the later updates for the Switch version added a host of graphical post-processing options, where you can adjust the settings, like depth of field, blur effects, bloom, anti-aliasing, and other effects, which was cool because you could fine-tune the game to your liking and help improve things in terms of the visuals. Of course, you had to be mindful because certain features would impact the game's performance, and you most certainly could not enable them all without risk of a potential awful experience. When the Switch 1 version is played on Switch 2, you need not to worry. You can turn on all these post-processing effects if you desire. The game maintains its frame rate cap throughout. In addition, it'll look clearer, maintaining a high resolution in both handheld and dock play, and the load times have been cut down a bit across the board. It's a nice improvement, and these performance boosts will definitely hold us over until we get a proper Witcher 3 release for the Switch 2.
The legends of the White Wall? You can learn a great deal.
The XCOM 2 collection on the original Switch was a bit of a poor way to experience the game and its expansions. Yes, all the content and gameplay is there, but you gotta deal with some seriously long load times for everything, a pretty low resolution, and a much lower frame rate that was pretty inconsistent. This same game, when it's played on the new system, gets a huge boost here. It looks so much sharper and clearer with a higher resolution for the game, in both docked and handheld play, and the load times that plagued it are a thing of the past. Of course, the game is operating at 60 FPS now too. Oh, it's so good, it's so much faster, better performing, and better looking than before. It's a 100% complete difference from where it was.
These guys make up the bulk of the Advent forces we've dealt with. They're well equipped, but their obedience makes them predictable.
Enemy target neutralized.
And there you go, a look at some of Switch 1's more troublesome games, and how they run on a Switch 2. Some games get a huge boost, fixing a lot of issues. Others get a decent one, that at least make them more playable. Except, Arkham Knight, which, it technically does look better, but the crashing issues kinda ruins the experience, and yeah, that's not good. Anyway, hopefully you enjoyed today's video. If you want to check out some more Switch 1 games getting some boosts, well, I got a whole series on that topic, and I'll have links to those videos down below if you want to check them out. Beyond that, make sure you subscribe with notifications turned on so you do not miss out on any future videos. Anyway, that is it for me today. Thank you so much for watching and subscribing. I hope you have a good rest of your day, and I'll catch you soon on the next video.